On 14th April 2021, Coinbase made history by successfully listing on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol COIN. This momentous occasion not only marked Coinbase as the world's first publicly traded cryptocurrency exchange, but also cemented its reputation as a pioneer in cryptocurrency compliance. As we enter 2024, Coinbase has been making frequent moves in the APAC region, sparking curiosity about its plan for expansion. To gain insight into these developments, we sat down with John O'Loughlin, Managing Director of Coinbase APAC. Our conversation with John covered a range of topics, including his fascinating experiences in Beijing since 2005. We discussed his career journey through Goldman Sachs, Domino Pizza, Gong Ho Pizza, Alibaba Group, and Ant Group, as well as the circumstances that led him to join Coinbase. More importantly, as a leader of Coinbase APAC operations, we explored John's strategies for leading Coinbase as a relative newcomer in the region already teeming with established competitors. What strategies does he have in mind to navigate the intricate business landscape of the APAC region? Let's tune in as host Vivian and Zhiyang lead an engaging discussion with John. Hello, everyone. So today we invited John to join our podcast. And John currently represents the Coinbase. Yeah. So we are the very good friends. And do you want to say hi to our audience, John?
Yeah, hey, thank you. 嘿，你好，大家好。我是 John， 我是一个管理人，在一个 Coinbase， 在一个 APAC， 还有我们的一个 day job managing director of Coinbase Australia. So my name is John O'Loughlin. I'm a New Zealander, been with Coinbase for 2.5 years, live in Sydney, and help manage the business across APAC. And great to be with you today.
Yes. So, John, because we have discussion before, and you mentioned that you had experience in different Chinese enterprise, right? So, and you spent time in mainland China as well. So, could you share some of your life experience in China, and how do you think about the Chinese, something like that?
可以，没问题。我去北京在2005年，一个2005。我工作在一个投资银行，一个 Goldman Sachs， 一个高商银行。我去北京，我要学习韩语，学习普通话，在一个北京语言文化大学。还有我是有点老，我是34岁差不多，所以我的投资有点一个 old. It's too old to study Chinese when you're in your mid-30s. But I went out to Beijing with an investment bank. Uh-huh. The country was clearly, moving very quickly. Mm-hmm. And at Goldman, they were actually removing all of the kind of Lao Wai, all the Guailo, all of the white people. Because why? Because, they have really good Chinese investment bankers, right? So why do they need any foreigners there? So I was really lucky to stay on in the business with a former Goldman Sachs chairman who was doing a lot of work at the management school at Tsinghua. And so looked at a lot of investments in China around 2006, 2007. And I wanted to stay in the country and I wanted to work in a real business. Mm. So I dived into the pizza industry. Oh. I was working for Domino's Pizza, 大美乐 Pizza 家店，这是一个加盟店，一个 franchising.
Is that Domino here?
Yep, Domino's in Australia, same brand, different master franchise. Okay. And so we built up the master franchises across Asia. Right. So in Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, etc. And actually still have a stake in that business, and that's grown to be a couple of thousand stores. After a couple of years, I got a little bit tired of the Domino's product. It wasn't.
You had too much?
I probably ate too much pizza, and it wasn't to be hot. But we decided to start our own business, and so we started our own brand in Beijing called Jiaoban Pizza, Gung Ho Pizza, and that was like a kind of 美式 pizza, gourmet pizza.
Gourmet.
Yep, and delivery, and we opened in Sanlitun and Wudao and had about 8 stores in the kind of wealthier parts of Beijing. And so that was, 400 people, all Chinese, lots of people from Dongbei, Jilin, all over the regions around Beijing. And that was actually where I first got exposed to the big Chinese platforms.
Right.
So WeChat Pay and Tencent and Alipay, they really came into that business probably 10 years before the Western markets in terms of, group buying, buy now, pay later, all of that functionality that you had within the super apps in China with delivery, food delivery, etc., loyalty. And I had to understand that business. They were really kind of eating our lunch. And we worked out in the pizza business, we couldn't be a technology company. So we actually got out of that business and wound up actually selling gung-ho to Meituan.
Oh,
Meituan had this dark kitchen business. Dark kitchen. In the dark kitchen, they co-locate all the different concepts. So like Luckin Coffee, pizza, chicken, donut, everything. And they have a central kitchen. You have a little kitchen inside it. And then the Waimai, all the delivery guys just go in and out from one location. The consumer never sees the kitchen. And they actually started doing that in Australia with Uber Eats and all the different Deliveroo and all the food companies here, the food delivery companies, literally in the last few years. So again, China was clearly like 10 years ahead in this phenomena. And then even Meituan had some trouble in that business. And they sold it back to our founders. And then I moved back to Australia in 2014 after about 10 years in the pizza business.
Right.
And then coming back to Australia, again, just kind of trying to make a transition, somehow got an introduction to Alibaba as they were starting their own international journey. And again, was working for a big, fast-moving Chinese organization in Australia, helping to build the Aussie and the Kiwi business in New Zealand.
Right. So that's basically the chance that you join Alibaba Group.
Yes. And that was really following the kind of Australia, New Zealand, China love affair around products and provenance. The best infant formula in the world, the best honey, the best milk, the best merino wool clothing, a lot of mother and baby, a lot of vitamin brands, Swiss, Blackmore, Fung Bing Bing, vitamin E cream, all that stuff, that stuff. So that was a great journey. And then bought in a few other businesses like Alibaba Cloud, Cainiao Logistics, and then Jifubao. Alipay came in and had a great journey for the Aussie Chinese tourist and the Australian students. But, the really big beneficiary of that was the Aussie retailers. So they all put Alipay at the checkout, Chemist Warehouse, DFS, Sydney Airport, the Australian universities. If you want to pay for your tuition, it's much cheaper to do than remittances. So, it was really, really special time building that business up, bringing these, payment innovations to the market. I think the funniest observation in hindsight was we spent all of this time educating Aussie retailers and Aussie consumers about QR codes, telling them how amazing and dynamic they are, how much information you can have in the QR code. Alipay had spent a lot of time pioneering QR codes across China and making them part of everyone's lives.
Yes.
COVID comes, fei dian, and every grandmother and old person can operate a QR code because the government told them how to.
I think that is only advantage for the pandemic.
Only upside of pandemic, speed up QR code adoption. And now, QR codes are omnipresent, and they're clearly a big part of our crypto business as well as you look at payments and fintech in Australia. So, that's a little brief background.
So why you joined Coinbase? So what brings you move to the crypto?
Yeah, good question, Vivian. I think as Alibaba and Ant had a few little challenges and had some challenges with the regulators in China, the business kind of slowed down somewhat after the IPO was halted, and we were really looking at other opportunities. I had a lot of friends, really old friends from my earliest days at Goldman Sachs in 2000 in London, my analyst class. There were 3 or 4 people who I really respected and had a huge amount of kind of trust in their own careers and journeys. Some of them have gone to China with me. Others had been to university with me in the States. They were very deep into crypto. Not like an experiment, but deep into it for probably 7 or 8, 9 years. Also, my brother-in-law in Singapore, who's Australian, had a real-world asset token exchange. And so some of my family and my wife had been exposed to crypto through him. And a number of these Goldman people had gone on to Galaxy. I knew the Winklevoss brothers pretty well from rowing days at university, helped them look at Australia with Gemini when Gemini was looking at a project with CBA Bank. When that project didn't go anywhere, I pivoted to an introduction to Coinbase. And that was just when they wanted to formally register in Australia, register with Austrac, and bring the business onshore and basically pursue what has become Coinbase's go deep, go broad international strategy. The go deep strategy is where you are regulated on the ground. You have local, compliance and AML regulations and local directors. And then you onboard everyone through the Australian entity. We also do this in Singapore, much of continental Europe and England, Brazil and Canada and the US. And those are our go deep markets, and we're looking to open up more go deep markets. Quite a different approach to the Chinese exchanges or some of the big international players, where they operate kind of on the high seas of offshore markets.
Yeah, more like the non-KYC part.
Yeah, I'll let you say that. But
I can see something you can't.
Sure, yeah. But, we are very humbled by these competitors. They move very quickly. They're really native tech businesses like Coinbase. They were kind of founded for crypto. And so we're competing with them all over the world. And in the non-deep markets, we go broad and we use Base, our layer 2 Ethereum product, or Coinbase Wallet, or NFT exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So we have other products for other markets, but we're looking to expand. And I was drawn to Coinbase really because of the brand. I think when you look at where I worked at Goldman Sachs or Domino's or even Alibaba and Ant, they're very strong brands.
Yeah.
Also, really strong internal culture. And I think I know, having set up our own business, and Gung Ho Pizza was crazy about culture. Our underlying mission at Gung Ho Pizza was to change people's lives, change the consumer life, because they're working with a B corporation or a sustainable pizza business, and change our employees' lives by bringing them on the journey. At Coinbase, the mission is to increase economic freedom. That is a huge statement.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's I think why a lot of us, and I've spoken to you guys about this at meetups and offsites and base meetups or Upside Down or community meetups. People in this industry really want to revolutionize finance.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm in it. And I think Coinbase is one of the strongest brands to be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So talking about the economic freedom, I think that would be a really interesting topic to talk about. Is there are many people think about if the crypto is regulated by the government, there's no more or not much freedom anymore. How would you say that? Because it was always like, the maximalists, they want like complete freedom. I don't want any governments to control my asset. They can't seize my asset, so I can do like P2P transfers directly without any interference, right? So how would you say that, since, Coinbase is the first regulated listed company, in crypto?
Yeah, look, 100%. This is a great question, Jiang. I think you're right. The Bitcoin maxis out there and some of the original industry anarchists and others, they like that anonymity, they like that obscurity. They really want to be kind of decoupled from and not even connected to the traditional financial rails, right?
Yeah.
Our company mission is to get 1 billion people on chain. And in order to do that and increase economic freedom around the world, we probably need to have a degree of connectivity with fiat rails, because it's not everyone can, operate in the wallet space or in a DAO or in a Web3 environment to top up their account. And so as soon as you start kind of touching sovereign currency and fiat money in a big way, you have to kind of be ready to play by the rules. And I think increasingly, as the big tech platforms have grown, and you've seen, major regulation in Europe like GDPR around privacy of consumers' information, and recent regulation in Europe around MiCA and what we can do with accredited investors versus regular consumers. I think we've kind of come to an understanding that we can keep the best of what decentralized finance is about, but also operate with regulators and be a good actor. And I think there's a middle road in terms of being able to offer this product to, the broadest number of people on the planet. So I think the point is, when you're working with dollars and rupees and euros and Japanese yen and renminbi, etc., you need to be respectful of the existing regulation, but we do need to have the regulation terminology and lexicon and kind of dictionary upgraded, because we know from the court cases we've been involved with the SEC, and other exchanges and other tokens have also been in these court cases where they invariably win by defining the tokens as a commodity and not a security or a utility. A lot of the laws, including the Companies Act in Australia or the Howey test in the US, are dated around 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old use cases around that law. And the terminology is not fit into the updated terminology around stable coins or definitions of what tokens are. And so we think we need an upgrade of the language, and that's happened in the case of Europe. We see it happening in the Middle East. We believe it's going to happen in North America. And we also have some draft legislation being tabled in Australia. Of course, we would like it to happen sooner than later, but we're pushing that along in Canberra and other capitals of the world, particularly in those go deep markets where we are.
Right.
Cool. So I know a lot of the different the exchanges, and they operate in different things like the spot exchange and like the future exchange, and some exchanges they even bought the local stock, the traditional stock exchange, bring them to the crypto exchanges. So what about the Coinbase? Is Coinbase adapt different services based on the different regions?
Yeah, good question, Wime. I think you're seeing a kind of wholesale evolution in the business in a couple of different markets that are different. So our home market is the US. That's where we started. That's where the brand was built. We have over 110 million consumers there, and that market's quite mature. And we offer an array of products there, mainly in the spot market, but including VIP programs, Coinbase One, which is a subscription program. We're looking to offer a high net worth program. We have staking and yield and all sorts of other things that all the other general large kind of global exchanges offer. As you go international and you look at other geos, APAC, as we know, has got a very, very big advanced trader cohort. Very serious traders.
Yeah.
They like lots of leverage. They like options. They like derivatives, etc.
Yeah.
Because we're listed by we're publicly listed and governed by the SEC, we've been a little bit late into that market. And I would say before FTX blew up, FTX and Binance, they really made huge inroads into that market. Yeah. And in recent times as well, Bybit and OKX have also done very well in that space. We've launched a derivatives platform out of Bermuda. We're very close to the regulator there. We feel like that's a good place to be registered for that product for accredited, approved investors. But we would like to open that up to consumers globally, and also potentially have them on board through an Australian entity or through a UK entity, so you don't have to always go through Bermuda. And so in order to do that, we will likely require an AFSL license in Australia or a different type of license in Europe, etc. So we're taking, I would say, a more kind of governance route to what we can offer consumers. And our KYC and our enhanced due diligence may be a little bit of a higher bar for people to get through. But we believe that for that kind of process, we offer a degree of protection and security, which is in line with the controls we put in place. I would highlight we're the only exchange that hasn't had a wholesale hack. While individual accounts have been hacked, we've reconciled those funds and always recovered those funds. We invented crypto insurance, and we're doing a lot of things, I would say, around cryptography and key sharding and security that we really believe is best in class, in addition to literally tens of internal audits on the country entities and on the parent entity that just ensure that when things go wrong, There are processes in place to ensure continuity of business. We can find your crypto, we can find your Bitcoin, we can find your Solana, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think, a lot of those things take time, they take money, they take investment, but that's the approach we're taking. We are looking to advance our retail advanced trading platforms. We're looking to do a whole lot of things with high-end clients and referral programs and all sorts of things that are kind of table stakes for an OKX or a Bybit, etc. And there's a really big push out of that, particularly from our Singapore team. So we're using Singapore as a hub for a US dollar offering into Singapore, and we can actually onboard users from all over Asia into Singapore in line with local regulations with the MAS, which is very similar to why Singapore is a wealth hub for private wealth and high net worth people all over the region. So that's a little bit of color on the APAC business versus the global business historically. When you think about brokerage or bank, to your point about trading stocks, Vivian, we've seen lots of people get into this in Australia with like Stake, for example, or in the US with Superhero. And a lot of times these groups come together and find that in the back end, the equity trading's product is very different to the crypto product. Maybe someone's making all the money out of the crypto and getting nothing out of the equities because it's gone to like super low fees. And so I think a lot of those tie-ups had quite good vision, but were very hard to execute. We have decided to be a pure play in crypto and digital assets. We're not going to offer equities to trade. We think about it. It's come up in strategy sessions previously. Investors have asked about it. I'm sure it will come up again. But in the meantime, we're sticking to our knitting and really being the best in-house, best kind of service crypto player in the market globally.
Yeah, totally understand.
Yeah. So, please.
Last time I talked with one of my friends, and he mentioned one of the exchange to me, and he said, I can purchase the Tesla's stock on this exchange. And I said, can I? And when I opened it, I just want, because we are in a different IP address. So some things he can see, but it's blocked from my end. So I think all the regulation things is quite different.
Yeah. So actually, that's one more thing I want to discuss since we talk about Coinbase strategies in different regions in the world. Last year, I think I read reports about the Binance global expansion, and they particularly mentioned Africa. They realized that there's a huge difference between Africa and the rest of the world, especially due to the language barriers and also the cultural differences. What will you see the global expansion on Coinbase? Do you have any major challenges or difficulties at this stage?
Look, I think we kind of look at the geography and see what is the existing regulation, what does the future regulation look like, what is the TAM like. I would say there are a number of geographies outside of Asia that have hundreds and hundreds of millions of consumers. They are in a really kind of poor environment for being served by traditional banking. They're getting absolutely hammered on fees for remittances. There's not good microfinance available. They can't do a side hustle in the way that you can in Thailand or Philippines with Learn and Earn. And so we think there's a huge opportunity here, whether it's Bangladesh or Pakistan or Nigeria or Kenya.
And
India, exactly. I was just in India last week with some people in government in Australia looking at cybersecurity and other things and showcasing the teams and the work we do in India. And we've been in India historically as well, and it's a market we like. But in terms of the Africa geo per se, we serve that currently through Base. We have a pretty major ambassador program going in Africa. We've done events all over the continent. And that Base is kind of just living a life of its own. It's just kind of taking off. And so Jesse Polak, who runs Base, he's in Kenya before he goes to DevCon. So he will come directly to DevCon from Nairobi.
Oh,
cool.
So you can ask him about it when you're in
when we're in Thailand.
One of my team members, Morgan Williams, she was in Kenya last year and Nigeria hosting meetups. So I think, Base is a really good project for that with Coinbase Wallet. And I think we're just going to see that kind of grow and grow and grow. I think the challenge is in those geographies, clearly there have been some challenges to having boots on the ground in those geographies, and one of the exchanges you mentioned directly has certainly had issues there. So, look, we think about the security of our teams and our staff, as being incredibly important. And if there's a risk to having boots on the ground there, we'll hold off from visiting those markets. But it's not a matter of if, but when. Probably the geo that excites me the most about an alternative kind of approach to finance is probably South America. South and Central America have for a long time been dependent on the US dollar. That hasn't been beneficial for their national economies. There have been, in Brazil and Argentina, there are different official pegs to the dollar. So you've got the tourism US dollar, you've got the meat export US dollar, you've got the education US dollar. They all have different valuations. And there are huge hurdles to people, moving that currency around due to capital controls, getting licenses or regulatory approval to meet those different pegs and benefit from the different valuations. We're looking to do some work in Argentina. We've met with the recent leadership in Argentina, and they're looking to approach things differently. And clearly in Central America, there are some economies that have tied their entire economic plans to Bitcoin. And so I think in those geographies, it's very exciting. Mexico is a huge remittances market, always has been. And so I think there's opportunities there to offer, Mexican citizens something far better than MoneyGram or Western Union or the other services that are in play. So I think might be some interesting stuff to come out of Central, Latin, South America first, but then Africa and South Asia, clearly a huge ballpark. I would say, though, when you talk to regulators in these economies where their average income is quite low, the last thing they want is someone losing their money to some scam or some fraud. And so they're also trying to weigh up that. And that's where I think Coinbase, as a good actor, can really come in and show that, look, this is how we do things. This is how we prevent these bad practices from happening. And why don't we help educate you on this journey? And that, that's another part of that's a really humbling part of my job. I feel very privileged to be able to talk and engage with government regulators as they look to educate themselves on this journey.
Yeah. Last time I went to the Istanbul, and when I have the private guide to guide me to all the temples and the cathedrals, and when he asked me what job you are working for, and I said crypto, and he said, okay, let me show you my wallet. You see, I got Bitcoin, I got Solana, I got Ethereum, and I just asked why you purchased those things. Do you have the guide, or do you have the trading strategies, and what guides you to purchase those kind of the cryptocurrencies? And he said no, because our inflation is quite incredible. I think Istanbul, Turkey is quite open market, but to the Middle East, they even have the dark market to trading all the US dollars and just to hedging their inflations. So I think crypto is very good ways.
Clearly USDC and to a different extent USDT. Stable coins have been an incredibly important tool in this space, and I think they will continue to be. Turkey's also a market we look at a lot, and clearly had huge inflation challenges, and its central bankers have had really big troubles in recent years. But look, I hear that same feedback that you hear when we all the time. And Bitcoin and others have proved to be a really important hedge, like gold, to inflation. So I think when you meet some of the world's most kind of advanced and biggest traders in the world, they really have a distrust of central bankers and their ability to just kind of print money and see a debasement of national currencies in the world. And that's where, particularly Bitcoin and Ethereum into the equation, into the discussion.
Right. Since you talk about Turkey, actually, if we come back to the APAC, the people always say that there are two biggest hub in Asia, or APAC, which are Singapore and Hong Kong, right? So, in your opinion, since you're responsible for the expansion in the Coinbase expansion in APAC, what are the regions or countries that you have the highest expectations? Let's say in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, look, full disclosure, her family's from Hong Kong, so I have to be very careful about what I say. I don't have a tai-tai, but if she was, she'd probably be from Hong Kong as well. So A lot of affection for Hong Kong, and I clearly, it's the first place I visited in Asia when I was 7 years old in 1980. And I know that the governor was just down in, Paul Chan was just in Sydney last week.
Yeah.
Really promoting Hong Kong as an open place for business. And we've spent a lot of time talking to the regulators in Hong Kong for as long as I've been in the business and well before that. And so they're clearly, been quite proactive in charting their own journey around registering exchanges in Hong Kong. So I think to date, we've chosen Singapore as our hub in Asia, but that doesn't preclude us or exclude us from doing business in Hong Kong. We have lots of institutional clients in Hong Kong. And so I think the Hong Kong government, like the MAS in Singapore, they really want to protect the consumer. Mm-hmm. They're always wary of mass speculation, but they really like innovation. Mm-hmm. So, I think we were talking before the podcast about Animoca. Mm-hmm. We work closely with them. They're a key account across all parts of our business. Web3, stablecoins, other listings for their education token. We do custody for them for Insto, etc. So clearly Hong Kong wants crypto to succeed.
Yeah.
And I think we continue to have conversations with them. We've talked about sub-custodian roles for the Hong Kong Bitcoin offerings, and those will continue. But for historical purposes, we've put our hub in Singapore. We have some of our senior leadership from Hong Kong who are actually in Singapore, and I've got another trip scheduled there in the first quarter of next year. So I think, kind of TBC or watch this space in terms of what we think about Hong Kong. Other geos in the region include Japan. We've been in Japan historically. They've taken a different approach around custody in particular, and that's been beneficial for them in light of the FTX journey, but it does require you to have quite a complicated build around hot and cold wallets and ratios of, tokens that are in market or out of market and physical obligations as well. And so we still have a license in Japan, and we're thinking about our Japan strategy, I would say, pretty actively. And again, just, kind of watch this space. And then there are other really lively markets around, like Philippines, for example, right? So we serve Philippines with many partners. We work closely with PDAX, with CoinsPH, with others. We have very big teams in Philippines on a CX side, and some of probably the most energized people in our whole organization are in the Philippines. And we've got a visit there in November and December, and there's always someone there probably every second month. But we really serve that with Base and USDC partnerships right now on Base and our wallet as well. The other big market that clearly has had a lot of adoption is Korea. We need to make a very serious commitment to partnering in Korea if we're going to be successful there. Lots of big chaebols and banks approach us. And for us internally, it's a prioritization process. Can we actually service this right now? So again, there are discussions around Korea. But the good news is with Web3, you can be in these markets all the time. So we had full teams at Korea Blockchain Week last week.
Yeah. Okay.
One of our great kind of former colleagues, a guy, Giuliano Octavianos, he's moved to Korea. So he's a great resource for us for intelligence on the ground. And we have a bunch of Koreans in our leadership team. One, Dan Kim, is the head of listings. He was in Korea for Blockchain Week. So, we're really keeping our finger on the pulse. But to that go deep, go broad strategy, if we're going to go in somewhere, we're going to go deep. And so we have to do our homework and make sure our partnerships are right. We're going to get ready for a marriage, not a dating session. The worst thing you can do is, kind of go into a market and then have a bit of a falter and slow down and not commit to the market. So in all of those other places, we're very deep into Base and Web3 activity or servicing accredited investors and bigger investors with our institutional team. And then at the right time, we'll get fully registered and compliant and go in there with our full consumer spot offering.
So what about the Chinese speaking market? Is a deep strategy or the broad strategy? Which one?
We're in a Chinese speaking market right now. 你要说普通话吗？澳大利亚很多的人他们说中文在这里。
The people especially for the Chinese speaking people, Coinbase is definitely not the exchange that they're familiar with. That's the fact.
知道
Yeah.
我知道
They're more familiar with the OKX.
当然
OKX,
当然
Binance.
OKX is, Binance, okay, maybe OKX is more
Yeah,
famous.
And
currently,
Biget,
right?
you know it.
Yeah.
And
没有意思，不好意思。I'm very embarrassed when you say this because I'm so passionate about China. But look, you're absolutely right. Those are Chinese kind of IP founded exchanges. We've had a lot of debate about what Coinbase's Chinese name should be. So, you know, I would even say there's a live project going on right now to choose Coinbase's, you know, Chinese name to make sure that we land properly on a Chinese name. But look, we serve consumers right now, you know, entirely legally in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in Singapore. And if a Chinese person, you know, really wants to be on Coinbase, they can probably find a way to do that through an offshore ID or someone they know in another market. And clearly, you know, we're thinking about the Chinese market until a point in time where it's legal for a US listed company to be on the mainland offering an exchange service, let alone a Chinese company who can't do it right now.
Yeah.
It's probably at the back end of the queue in terms of priorities. What I would say is that this is a global industry. And so we don't, you know, while we have a go deep, go broad strategy, we think of it as a borderless industry. On a human capital standpoint, it certainly is. One of the things that is a privilege of my job is getting to work with the smartest people in the world. And particularly in the product engineering design space, this is a heavily mainland Chinese populated org chart. People who have gone to university abroad, they've come back, they've moved around. So, you know, really big cohorts of our US teams, our Singapore teams, even our European teams are just truly world-class Chinese employees and human capital. Wow. I'd say the same thing is true for India. You know, we've got big engineering teams in India and all over the world. And again, if you look at the senior most part of our org chart in the US, there's a pretty large number of standout, you know, Indian origin or ethnic Indian professionals as well. And to my mind, you know, that's just a very normal thing and, you know, the cosmopolitan nature of the technology platform world. But, you know, India and China are outweighted in their contribution to crypto. And if you look at that for a bunch of exchanges in the Middle East as well, in Africa, you know, Indian professionals are everywhere. And Indian founders and in the options space and perpetuals and derivatives as well. So very, very, very interested in China at a point when it's legal and really comfortable for a listed group like Coinbase to enter.
Yeah. Let's back to the market educating things. We talk all about regulation things. And for the educating, we have Binance Academy right now, and every exchange, I can say each exchange, they have their own education things. But when you deep inside, you will find, okay, they have the same contents, right? What is Bitcoin? What is Ethereum? What is layer 2? And sort of the things, what is NFT? And all the content is quite the same. So what about Coinbase? I don't think Coinbase want to do the quite same contents and distribute to the same group of people, right? So about market educating, every people in this industries we know, currently we all playing with each others in the inner cycle. And we want to bring in outsiders into these inner cycles. So what about Coinbase? Does Coinbase also have the marketing educating strategies?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we certainly do. And I'd say we're a little bit late to the market on this. And just in terms of the headcount we have here, right? We've got a handful of people in Australia, 60 or 70 in Singapore. The challenge with that is that it's kind of a little bit upside down because in Singapore you can't market to consumers because the MAS prevents you from doing that. Yeah. So we have to kind of take quite an unusual approach there and base everything around education and meetups and use existing kind of customers and let them spread the word through their own networks, etc. So we have to take quite a conservative approach there. But we do, as of the last 6 months, we have budget for this. We previously really haven't had a marketing team in place, and we've recently filled out what we call our kind of growth pod strategy which is really Brian Armstrong's view for how do we want to have a growth pod for EMEA, one for the Americas and one for APAC that can really serve as a hub and spoke model to kind of scale products and launches and campaigns. If I think about Australia and I look at a lot of the work that Binance have done, they've really led the path there. And we have to be a little bit careful about using influencers or finfluencers or others around that, just because of, I would say, the regulatory spotlight that we're under. And again, there are certain products you can and can't talk about. It's no problem to market them to your existing customers with an internal CRM. But if I was to go out and put something on Spotify or on a podcast or something about, another product that might have yield or something to do with lending, we would be exposing ourselves pretty seriously to the incoming regulator in terms of ASIC. And we take our interactions with ASIC incredibly seriously. So we are certainly open for business. We are looking at a series of ambassadors. We're looking to do a lot more kind of paid search. And I think it's more of a sustainable approach. I would prefer to have our kind of customers speak on our behalf. And we're also looking at a program around that. Not so much around a referral program, but really get your customers to talk to you kind of with a net promoter score type approach by saying that, look, sometimes the best description of your business can come from someone who's had a problem and say, okay, we've resolved this. So we've got, live CX teams now with dedicated headcount, not chatbots, real people you can talk to who serve the Australian market. And so, I'm kind of hopeful that in coming months we'll start making a little bit more noise with kind of that, I would say, soft NPS type score approach. We're also looking to do a bunch of innovative work around, I'd say, kind of sustainable events. So, for example, we're not out there sponsoring AFL and NRL and sporting matches, because whether you like it or not, sports marketing in Australia is linked to sports betting. And sports betting and wagering is not particularly liked by the current government nor the Prime Minister. And so this Labor government is very much around consumer protection. That's very much been their mandate in all of their times in office. We're also very much around protecting our consumers. So we're not going to be, kind of blanket billboard advertising at all the sporting events in the way others may do. We're looking to do something next month in Melbourne with the Melbourne Marathon. Looking to activate a whole bunch of NFTs to be minted with a smart wallet around your finishing time and your medals and the race course and your merch. And it'll all be one-click kind of activation, working with IMG, the huge, talent and sports marketing group who run the Nike Melbourne Marathon. And we're looking to do stuff, I'd say, with more community groups and grassroots groups in Australia that maybe don't quite meet the kind of crypto native Binance audience and don't quite meet the low end of the kind of normie audience, but something in the middle. People who maybe have a little bit of a lower risk tolerance, but they want to get into this space. And so we need to then find activities and brands that match that profile. So think about things like the Surf Lifesaving Club and things that are really in the backyard of your community. And as well as, for the higher end users like retail advanced traders, we hold lots of meetups and dinners, and we do that with VC clubs and high net worth family office clubs. And we'll get 20 people to a dinner, fly down a few people from Singapore and an institutional team, and just talk about crypto research and trading activities and allocations and various listings, etc. And that's a lot more intimate kind of program, but that's really about referrals and word of mouth. So those are how we're meeting the two ends of the market in Australia, and then the INTX offering overseas is for the really advanced user who wants a bit more leverage and risk.
Yeah, I think that is very clever strategy, because when I talk with some people, they are the newbie in the crypto. If I retweet some articles to them, and they will think, okay, that is too boring. And what I'm going to do, and I just read in these articles, and then what? And I think if when you mentioned about the marathon, the Melbourne Marathon, because I'm the runner, so normally sometimes I really need to find my BP time, and every marathon runners, their dream is to have the Boston's to have the Boston scores, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and the Boston scores, they have very strict times for the males and the females athletics. So, and I always think when I into the crypto sections, I always think that those things are very, very important and very worthwhile to bring those times on chain, because these are really, really important time for your own life, your BP time, right? And every time and every second you work for it, and that is very easy ways to help you to adopt you to the crypto industries, and at least you can experience those things. You can have the wallet, and you can know, okay, so that is my numbers, and that is my running times, and those things are all in my wallet. That is the great things, and let people to use the wallet and learn what wallet it is, right?
Yeah, and we need like really practical use cases for wallets beyond. And I know you have had interest in IP and art, right? Fine arts in your background, Jang. And so I think that's where we're minting all of these commemorative items around the marathons. You know, I've also run a bunch of marathons in New York and some big marathons, and you know, people are desperate. There's a commodity value to getting an entry, right? And eventually, you know, interestingly, marathon merch has kind of evolved. So we've got really cool, you know, Lululemon or whatever the marathon brands are. I don't even know what they are because I'm too old, but I know there's a lot of them, and they're all like bum bags and caps and compression socks and Hoka running shoes, what have you. The commemorative items like the time and the photos are still really old school.
Yeah.
You know, you go and get the photo booth, and the photo's got the ink mark on it, so you can't copy the photo until you buy it, and everyone screen grabs their photo, but it's got a stupid ink mark on it, so then you actually have to buy it if you don't want to look like you're really poor. But imagine what we're going to do in the Melbourne Nike Marathon with IMG is mint this stuff so you can see your course, you can see your bib number, your time, and it's in your wallet, to your point, Vivian. So that's really cool, you know, and that's something that we believe has got utility and it's got attractiveness, but it's for a certain demographic that's probably younger, probably got a bit more money, a little bit professional. They like their wellness, they think about their health, and so that's where we're really trying to meet and align with certain demographics that we believe are interested in the Coinbase brand and why Coinbase is important.
Yeah, I think currently that is the currently crypto industries, they always have some, how can I say, it's conflict or something is confusing. Because most of the people they are attracting by the crypto industry is because they can earn the bunch of the money. Everybody is looking for the arbitration opportunities or the speculating opportunities. But I think if we want to, if we talk about mass adoptions, I think the making money is obviously it's one side, maybe the upside, right, of the crypto. But how can we use those cryptos can improve our lifestyles, improve our life experiences? That is another practical things. I think you use both things, and I think those is the things when we talk about, when we position ourselves as the marketing educator, I think both things we need to focus on.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you're just in it for speculation, the industry is going to go nowhere. You know, we need to mature. We need to grow up as an industry. Crypto needs a rebrand. And for that reason, that's why we're so invested in Base, looking for these case studies. You know, the restaurant industry is rife for a reinvention for payment and getting more kind of margin out of the business, given what the platforms have done to it. We talked about that before. We're doing work on Base around that. The art IP industry, friend tech, identity, remittances, you know, wellness. There's a whole lot of exciting stuff in the train. Unless you're in the industry and you're probably talking to as many people as you two do, people on the main street don't know this. People in Canberra, people in Washington, people in London, people in Beijing, in government halls, they don't know this stuff. So it's really important that we're vocalizing and educating people on this to show constituents and members of parliament and representatives, this is what their communities want, particularly a younger audience.
True. And I think because you mentioned that Coinbase may be, Base will be late for the APAC market, I don't think so. I think at this point, especially the market now, we can see that. I think it's a good point, a good time to enter the market. Last episode, Vivian and I talked about what will be the next step for the crypto in terms of the business model, in terms of the token distribution. All the things need to be reshaped and rethink. So I think the Coinbase at this point like really starts to its expansion in this region. I think it's the time to bring a new or refresh idea on how to develop or contribute to the crypto industry for the next decades.
I think when we talk about last episodes, it's mainly because everybody talking about this cycle is coming for the bullish and starting from this year. And however, when we go back to see today's Bitcoin prices and Ethereum prices, we do find that actually bullish market haven't come. And I think currently the industry is rethinking what crypto it is, what crypto really can bring us. Because I think the bubble has burned. The bubble has burnt because of the last time about DeFi summers, right? The bubbles create from DeFi summer and the FTX things and the Luna's things, and they've already picked up all the bubbles. And so I think all the industries are rethinking what crypto can be in the futures, how the crypto can reshape. If we really want to change this world by the cryptos, then what the crypto industry can do to reshape our life, how we balance the speculating things and the changing our real lifestyles things. I think that is what Jiang's means. So it's currently Coinbase on the really right time and to be the leaders in these crypto industries.
Yeah, look, certainly. And I think, a lot of people talk about the election in the US, and we've been very, very clear. If there's a market that we can advocate in, it's clearly the US, right? So we want this to be, a kind of rare situation where crypto is a bipartisan issue, right? It appeals to voting blocs on both sides of the aisle. We've had 1.3 million advocates sign up to pro-crypto policies, and it's really with our Stand with Crypto approach. And so, particularly in places like Georgia and Arizona, these advocates have kind of surpassed the Biden-Trump voter differential in these battleground states. So they're being heard. We did this really big push on pro-crypto policies for SAB 121. And although the Senate rejected it, we had the majority leader's support, Senator Schumer. And then the House passed the Financial Innovation and Technology Bill for the 21st century, FIT 21.
FIT 21, yeah.
Yeah, which is a really important framework for consumer protection, and that's a big bipartisan majority that Congress, outside of a must pass, its government spending legislation. So I think you're seeing candidates from both sides of the aisle talk to this. In Australia, to make it kind of clear for local listeners, we went from the Liberal Party that really support finance and economics, right? They're all about fintech.
Always.
Yeah,
Always.
And that's their view.
Yes.
Labor's about the consumer, protecting the consumer, the family, low price for housing, keep inflation down, etc. So clearly it dropped from being a top 5 item to like a top 10 item for priority. So we then need to go to Canberra and advocate for this and get that voice strong again. But we've got to show the legislators and the people in power in Canberra, here are a bunch of use cases. These are things that are happening on chain. Ideally, they're on base. They don't have to be on base. And share a bunch of these stories and bring the founders and the citizens to these events and highlight what's happening. And so we're excited to be doing something later in the year in Melbourne around that and showcasing 4 or 5 founders, getting them exposed to a bunch of people from Canberra and government as well. So yeah, it is. You're right. It is Coinbase's job to tell that story. We have to do it a little bit differently in the US and in the UK or in Hong Kong or Singapore or Australia. But it's a really humbling part of my job to be able to work with great Web3 native crypto advocates and show these examples.
Yeah, since we talk about all the future about those cryptos, and we're all in these cycles. So what's the trends you are looking for you are thinking about the future of the crypto?
Yeah, certainly. One thing I'd say is when you look at our kind of venture bets and our investments, if you look at Coinbase Ventures portfolio, you can see things that we're interested in. If you also look at the Coinbase Ecosystem Fund or the Base Fund, They've only made 6 investments, but again, they're things that, we think are going to stand out over time. And a lot of it's around identity, crypto insurance, friend tech, infrastructure that we can strap on to existing Coinbase products and kind of grow the market or have a moat around the business. But there's even so many more than that. In Australia, there's a business, Clearview, which is looking at a blockchain exchange, effectively a stock exchange that's on change. I think there have been lots of challenges for the ASX here, who effectively have a monopoly on stock listing. There's the CBE or CBOE. It's a much smaller exchange, but effectively the ASX are the exchange. So imagine a kind of blockchain exchange, which would have far quicker atomic settlement, much cheaper pricing, far more kind of democratic to get into stocks. Even buying a stock right now, you need to get a broker. You need to file your returns with your tax return. It's quite arduous and complicated, and it's expensive. And so if you think about, being on chain, currently this blockchain exchange offers this service for private investments. So pre-IPO investments. So you can trade, let's say you have a pre-IPO investment in, Guzman and Gomez before the IPO. How do you get rid of it? Maybe you need some cash, you need someone to buy it. So that's all on chain, very clear. We should be making Sydney a digital finance hub for Asia because it's got such a big equities market, such a big self-managed super fund market. The pools of capital here are huge, but they're operating in a very kind of dated, old tech
it's more like
environment.
closed cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So we should upgrade that to the blockchain. So that's one example. Around art and IP, there's some really cool businesses. Lots of the original NFT artists are from Melbourne.
Yeah.
Globally famous ones, right? So what happens to them in the next world, and how are they evolving? But I think fractionalization of art and art intellectual property is one I see come up a lot.
Yeah.
Interesting one that is between the US actually and China or Bangladesh, Pakistan, some of these kind of tropical economies, is around trade finance, particularly for fresh fruit and vegetables, fresh produce. And a lot of those markets, getting USD is really expensive. Some of those people don't have USD accounts. So using USDC is a really easy solve for that, right? Lots of Chinese suppliers are happy to get USDC.
Yeah.
And so that's another interesting one I've seen. But I think if you're really interested and you're looking to park your own money, just look at the Coinbase ecosystem fund grants, and you can get some guidance there.
Yes, last time I already talked with the OKX marketing guy, and he asked me that, oh my God, like Coinbase invests so many like layer 3, and he can't even understand what's layer 3. It seems like Coinbase like invent this term, and then nobody can understand. And I mean, like, I'm not quite sure whether I'm right or not, but correct me if I'm not. I said, oh, it's simple. It's just an application layer. Like, you have so many different types of application that you can attract the people to use, to break them on chain, and that's the layer 3. There will be no more layer 4. I'm pretty sure that's from one of the spokesperson from Coinbase. Layer 3 will be the end. I think that will be one of them, like a major, like a bold move by Coinbase or Base, that, how you deliver your visions and missions in the next couple years, especially in terms of like break billions to on chain, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I don't know what the evolution is beyond layer 3, but effectively, they're built on layer 2. There's more functionality, more option, more interoperability, more performance, and I think we're kind of if you are in that venture investing space, they're really looking at these decentralized apps. And then, what is this layer 3 network to scale those solutions? So I think it's really about scaling these solutions kind of at speed. And I think the big thing for us with layer 2, particularly with Base, has been effectively in the most simplistic language, how do you get down the cost of the gas fees, right?
Yeah.
This is like, let's just call a spade, right? We'll call it really crudely. Layer 1 was just the blockchain network, so the foundational framework. Layer 2 was enhancing the scalability with some features. And then layer 3 is the endless list of, real world applications that sit on top and execute these tasks. And so, we're only just getting going on layer 2, really. And there's still lots of investing in layer 1. I mean, lots of people are kind of stuck with layer one, and they're very loyal to layer one, particularly the banks and kind of, I would say, more private, closed,
or the VCs.
Closed chain VC and banks as well.
It's quite secure for them.
Yeah.
They think that it is a safe investment.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
They can fulfill their responsibility to their LPs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for the layer threes, we do have some discussions about layer threes with my previous colleagues, and I really believe about the decentralizations. So I think layer 3 is the best ways to do the decentralizations, especially for the gaming. So currently you can see there has a lot of the independent gaming studios, and each gaming studios actually they can have their own layer 3s to implementing their own game, and they can have their own communities and for their own. Basically, that is a chain, right? Layer 3 is a chain, and those independent game studios they can hosting their own chains on very low cost. So that is what I'm understanding about layer 3.
Yeah, and if you're built into layer 1, you're kind of very much tied to the security protocols, the consensus mechanisms, the kind of core functionality of layer 1. I think lots of people want to skip right to layer 3. Yeah. Agree.
Cool. So the last question.
Yes.
Yeah, the last questions. Our audience has a lot of newbies. There has a lot of newbies, and they always ask us to do some like the 101 series for them to let them know more about real crypto, what crypto it is. So would you give us some suggestions about what kind of the 101 content that the newbies need to know, and maybe maybe next time we can really build some series for those newbies.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, look, I think this is a bit like me going to China, right? As somebody who didn't speak Chinese, right? Back in 2005. You need to learn by doing. Okay, so if you're a newbie, if you're not comfortable going and downloading 2 or 3 exchange apps and just checking out the KYC process, if you're not comfortable downloading Coinbase wallet or Trust or MetaMask or what have you, and working out how to link to your exchange wallet and deposit fiat, turn it into crypto, then buy Ethereum and use the gas fee to get some other app or play around in the gaming world. If you can't do that, you probably want to stick with stake or your self-managed super fund or something pretty boring, or maybe play, Tetris. If you can't make that leap, this isn't for you, right?
Yeah.
So I think you have to be really, really honest. This is learn by doing, right? And, I built a pizza business and I learned by doing, making pizzas, getting my hands dirty. And same with Chinese. I learned more about Chinese culture to talking to Chinese people who didn't speak English than talking to the really well-educated people like you who both had fluent English, because I'm going to learn more from someone just through the process of smashing together language and words and having to work out the culture, right? So I really believe that's what you need to do in crypto. The good thing is for you, there's so many tutorials, so many YouTube, so many people who are passionate about this, even as their day job, their side hustle, like this podcast, like Cryptopia. There's so many technology-enabled services for you right now, but you can't skip the corner, or you can't, not try by doing. You can't leapfrog this by just watching the YouTube. You actually have to do what they do on the YouTube, and you need to open the app and go through the phases and link the wallets, link the bank, et cetera, et cetera. Use the on-ramp, use the off-ramp, try some of this stuff. I would say use Monopoly money, use little money, don't use big money.
100 is maximum.
Oh my God, 100. 10 is maximum. You're never going to get 1 Bitcoin anyway. So, buying crypto with pizza, when it all started a long time ago, the inflation is real. So be careful. Do your homework, ask your friends for referrals. And also, even the process of moving something from a hot wallet to cold storage, onto a device drive is a really, complicated task. So do that. Another resource I found really useful, maybe for someone who's a bit older or has lived through Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, like internet, the original .com era, is this book by Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz, or A16Z, the biggest venture fund in crypto, also one of the biggest venture funds, period, called Read, Write, Own.
Okay.
Right? Read, Write, Own. It's really about the kind of potential of blockchain. How do we kind of take the power back from the platforms, and how do you monetize your eyeballs and your content and your identity, right? And so a lot of this is playing out in art IP, particularly for musicians and artists, right? They're really getting this generative long-term licensing of their content. But why does Spotify or Instagram get all the advertising revenue from your post and you just get some nano payment for it? Like, that's wrong, right? You should be getting something back from everyone who looks at your post. And that's what Friend Tech's all about. But I think if you want to look back at Web 1, which was reading on the internet, Web 2, which was publishing and writing on the internet, Web 3 and blockchain is about owning your content on the internet, your identity. And I think that is one of the best books I've seen on the space by Chris Dixon. So readwriteown.com. Check it out.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, one last thing. The last of the last. Could you give our audience like some head-ups on what are those upcoming events hosted by Coinbase or Base? Especially DevCon and also the first half or first quarter of next year?
Yeah, certainly. We'll also have a major base team at DevCon. We'll have probably 50 side events around DevCon. We've got teams coming from the US, from Europe, from Singapore into that. So that's super exciting. We are also sponsoring Singapore FinTech Festival, so we'll be there. Oz CryptoCon. We have a space at Oz CryptoCon in Australia and Sydney in November. I mentioned the Melbourne Marathon. There are base meetups happening all the time. There's one happening in 2 weeks in Sydney for NFT artists. And so again, ongoing schedule. I don't even know what's happening in Q1 because I'm trying to get through Q3 and Q4. So that's just a little preview, but let me get you some links to put on the podcast and share with your listeners.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
That would be good. Great.
Thank you so much, John, for today.
没问题，非常感谢，谢谢。
Thank you. So I think that is all for today.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Do you want to say bye?
再见，谢谢，
再见。
忙走，
Great.
拜拜。
Bye.
Oh, that big band sound turns me around. The gypsy style brings me a smile. Oh, how that swing taught me to sing makes my life worthwhile. And how that music gets me high and brings tears to my eyes. My hips are swaying